Okay, be honest. When you first began to learn about fair trade, did you think that it only applied to coffee, tea, or chocolate? I know it did for me. But when I really began to dive into the ethical industry and learn as much as I could about fair trade enterprises, my mind was blown. Fair trade is really, at its core, about creating opportunities to alleviate poverty in many different industries and communities around the world. Today's episode tackles this very topic and so much more. Welcome to Business with Purpose. I'm your host, Molly Stillman of Still Being Molly, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, companies, and small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I interview an entrepreneur, a CEO, nonprofit director, community leader, or just an all-around amazing person who's trying to make a positive impact not only through their personal life, but also with their career. My goal is to show you that no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact right where you are. My guest this week is Chris Solt, the Executive Director of the Fair Trade Federation. The Fair Trade Federation is an association that works to elevate and strengthen fair trade partners in the United States and Canada. It's part of the larger global fair trade movement, and I have wanted to have the Fair Trade Federation on this show ever since I started. So to be able to sit down with Chris was amazing. Also, we discussed in this show, but I wanted to let you know that I am actually going to be a plenary speaker at the Fair Trade Federation Conference in Austin, Texas in March. I could not be more excited and honored to be a part of this incredible conference. If you're in the Austin area and want to travel to the Austin area, you should absolutely come to the conference. There's going to be a massive expo with an incredible amount of fair trade organizations there showing their wares, incredible speakers and breakout sessions, and so much more. You can find out more about how to register at fairtradefederation.org. So without further ado, on to my conversation with Chris. Chris, when I first started this podcast in 2016, I guess you had just joined the Fair Trade Federation not long before that, but I wrote down this list of guests or brands or companies that I knew I wanted to have on the podcast. And here we are, and I am actually getting to check off one of those dream guests. And I went I could not have imagined that I would ever actually have the Fair Trade Federation on this show. So I'm so honored to have you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much. The honor is all mine. I listened to your podcast as some of our members have been interviewed on your podcast, and I was like, wow, what a great thing that you're doing, and had some amazing guests that I got to hear their stories as well. So yeah, the honor is all mine. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I never tire of hearing the stories of all these different people. I've always been that kind of person where when I was a kid, any new person I met, and I love, this is going to sound like a weird example, but just track with me here for a second.
Okay.
But when I was in college, I volunteered at a nursing home. And I visited nursing homes a lot as a kid because my parents would always take us to nursing homes to visit. And I have always just loved listening to older or more seasoned in life people tell their stories, and I'm just fascinated by life and fascinated by stories. And I think that's part of why I love interviewing these entrepreneurs and these people who have done these amazing things, because I just cannot get enough of hearing the stories of people who just have experienced life and the world, and I never tire of it. So it's a joy for me. So again, I'm so excited to hear your story. And so I'm going to have you do what all my guests do, and that's give us the Chris 101. So tell us who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a blank check.
I know.
And I'm going to take what you said earlier about wanting to or have craving hearing from older and wiser people. I'm not that old.
No, you are young. You are young.
But I'm the same. I'm the same. I love. I'm always interested in people's stories and their origin and what makes them tick, especially those people who like to express their values in everything they do. I just crave that as well. So so thanks. Yeah. So yeah, I feel I had kind of a long circuitous path to where I am today. I never really planned on being in this position, but I am just delighted and honored to be in this role, representing an amazing community. But so back to my 101, my origin. I was born and raised in the great state of Vermont. My father's side of the family is from Ohio. My mom's side of the family is from Maryland. But they met in college in Cincinnati and then didn't like Ohio as much, so they moved to Vermont, had me. This is how far back you wanted me to go.
Yeah, no, I love it.
And so, so after growing up in Ohio and actually grew up in Stowe and then moved to Burlington, was always a musician. My father was my music teacher, band director of the school system.
That's awesome.
So
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, always been a musician. So that's kind of in my DNA.
What do you play?
A lot of different instruments. Drums, bass, guitar, keys.
Nice.
I've done a lot of recording engineering. So was in a band in high school, and that was really a big focus of my life. Moved from Vermont right before I turned 18 to Ohio to attend recording studio school. I was really so into music. I didn't want to further my education after high school, and I looked in the back of Rolling Stone magazine and said, hey, need to do something but don't want to go to a college. Be a recording engineer in 7 short weeks. And there was this little guy with a pair of headphones on in the back of Rolling Stone magazine. And I said, that's for me. And I went and I was the top student, and they hired me to be a teaching assistant and intern. And this is a recording studio school called the Recording Workshop in Southern Ohio. And I was there for about a year. And then in that time period, I recorded a whole album and did a lot of music with a lot of other musicians, and ended up moving to Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes, Cleveland.
Which I've always loved my story of growing up in Vermont and then emigrating to Cleveland.
Emigrating,
which I really
I love it.
love that city so much. I lived there for 27 years and just moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
So I think we've talked about this.
Yeah.
You're a Browns fan, aren't you? Or you're not?
I feel
neutral. Like you and I have talked about this. You're neutral.
Yeah, I'm neutral to the NFL teams in Cleveland. But
see, I am not neutral.
So once I was in Cleveland, I did music. I was a live sound engineer, got in the music scene, and I did that for many years.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I worked in Borders, books and music.
Yeah.
From like 94 to 99, I didn't think I was going to be into retail, but I really loved it, and was able to keep doing music on the side. And I got involved in training and development, did really well, and I used to open stores for Borders. And then became a father in 99, and then went to college. So I was a full-time stay-at-home dad during the day, full-time college student at night, which was just a wonderful experience, wonderful connection with my child. And after college, I was studying to be a teacher in social studies, and I ended up getting a degree in social science. Was looking for different positions, doing research, and someone said to me, "Oh, I know you're looking for a job, but hey, there's this organization called 10,000 Villages that just opened a store in downtown Cleveland. I think you might be interested in it." I said, "No way. Not going to do retail again. I'm done with that." But I went and talked to them, and I was like, oh, that's right. I shopped at a 10,000 Villages store on a trip from Montreal back to Cleveland, and stopped in Niagara on the Lake, and went into a gift store and bought a mask from Indonesia, and I still have it to this day. I think that was 96, 97. Something like that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I learned about the mission. And I took the job there, and was recruited by the home office there at a meeting where we got to meet with a representative from Prokriti, a really wonderful group in Bangladesh. That works with 10,000 Villages. They're a member of the World Fair Trade Organization. And from there, I was recruited to work for the home office of 10,000 Villages. And that really was my kind of main introduction to fair trade. And so, yeah, I worked for 10,000 Villages as the regional director for the Northeast of the United States, and worked with their contract stores. They're all individually incorporated as nonprofits, and really exciting people. You mentioned getting to know people and having a lot of great joy with hearing people's stories. That was an incredible honor and joy.
Yeah.
I met so many amazing people, and just instantly, I felt like I found more of a vocation and the true sense of that term, and finding kind of a calling. Doing retail and being a musician and all this other stuff, and really being involved in training and development, all led me, with Borders and whatnot, really led me to think, wow, all of these skills can be used in one kind of calling. And
yeah, absolutely.
So I ended up doing training and development for 10,000 Villages, and I worked there about, I think it was like 11 full years until 2016. And the former executive director of the Fair Trade Federation was a good friend of mine who was the buyer for 10,000 Villages for India, Renee Bowers, just wonderful, wonderful person, and so talented. And she became the Fair Trade Federation executive director, I believe, in 2010. And she and I stayed in touch and helped. We kind of stayed connected on it because she was starting to build the organization's conferences and events, and she was familiar. I was kind of helped develop and implement the national conference that 10,000 Villages coordinated every year. So we kind of shared notes and tried to learn from each other's successes, and so we got to know each other in that way as well, as colleagues in different organizations. And they were the Fair Trade Federation was starting a new strategic plan in which they wanted to really focus on member development, and hired me to be their director of member education and events. And then about a year after that, Renee moved on to the Fair Labor Association, and she's doing really great work with them. And then the board assigned me the position of interim executive director, and then was recruited to be the permanent director in the summer of 2017.
That is awesome. What an amazing story.
That's the quick version.
No, I love it. And I think so often I learn from various entrepreneurs or various people who really found their calling kind of, not necessarily, I don't like to say later in life, but just not necessarily like right out of school, like necessarily what they went to school for. And they look back and all the little steps along the way, all the little experiences, had they not had this experience, or had they not, had this job, or had they not learned this skill from this position, they wouldn't have had that foundation that ultimately led them to what they're doing now.
Yeah. I totally agree with that 100%. And I agree too. It was a later in life thing for me. Being a father later in life, not going to college right out of high school, those things were, always interesting benchmarks. You think back why I decided this or that, but all coming together is I think is a gift, and it's rare. And so I just feel very grateful, for where I am right now, and that I do, kind of look back on the broken road as went through, and like, boy, there are some things that we experience in life when you don't really value them at the time, especially when you're a young person in your 20s and or younger. But they become to be very meaningful and valuable later in life. So that I agree with what you said.
Yes. Now, all right. So I want to get into the Fair Trade Federation, and because this is one of the most common questions that I get from people that begin to educate themselves with the sort of ethical space, the ethical community.
Sure.
And even for me, before I got into really learning about ethical fashion and ethical, what it meant to purchase with purpose, so to speak, every time I would hear the term fair trade, which I was familiar with, I just thought it meant coffee, tea, and chocolate. That was literally all I thought. I was just like, oh yeah, fair trade coffee, fair trade chocolate, fair trade tea. Yeah. And that was just sort of
I just thought it didn't go beyond that. And even then, I didn't necessarily fully understood what that meant. And then obviously, as I began to educate myself and learn more about what fair trade actually was and what the guidelines were, and that you could buy fair trade furniture and fair trade lighting and fair trade clothing and fair trade shoes and jewelry and all these other categories of, products that a consumer might buy, my mind was blown. And so would you just kind of explain a little bit, what is the Fair Trade Federation? What do you guys do? What are the guidelines? All that sort of stuff to kind of like when somebody is beginning to learn, what do you tell them?
Yeah, boy, that is a great question. And I'm glad that you talked about all the different ways fair trade can be practiced, because that is something that is important for consumers to learn about, because there are many different approaches to fair trade. Mm-hmm. It is part of a give and take relationship between those that are bringing products to market and those consumers looking for those options so that they can express their values as a consumer, which we are all taught from birth to consume. And so having this option is sometimes confusing, but to me, it is just it's the right way to interact with the consumer marketplace. So the Fair Trade Federation is a trade association, and it strengthens and promotes organizations in the U.S. and Canada fully committed to fair trade. We view ourselves as part of the global fair trade movement, and in our mission, it's to build equitable and sustainable trading partnerships and create opportunities to alleviate poverty. So, our community is really diverse, and it's just extraordinary. We have wholesalers, we have retailers, we have of our wholesalers, they have an incredible range of products, from Dr. Bronner's with soap and personal care products to fair trade fashion with clothing for men and women and children. There are lots of members who have handmade products that are, personal accessories, toys for children. It's really amazing. Also, the other way we're diverse is different sizes of organizations. We have a really large, for us, large organizations that have been around quite a while, like 10,000 Villages and Equal Exchange, to very, very small and emerging organizations that are a project of a nonprofit or a project of a faith community, or a young social enterprise like Fair Anita, which is two very hardworking women trying to make a difference in the world on behalf of their women artisans. Yeah. So the Fair Trade Federation is a member of the World Fair Trade Organization as a kind of a network in the U.S. and Canada, and we really share the same principles and values. Those are born out of the Fair Trade Charter. And I know I'm getting into the weeds here about my fair trade jargon, but
no, I think this is super helpful.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that's okay to keep going.
Yes, please, because I'm even learning stuff. I'm like, wait, what's the Fair Trade Charter? I don't know what this is.
You can just look up fair trade. Any of you or your listeners can look up Fair Trade Charter online, and that's a document that was created to try to have like an anchor to all of our values, to define what fair trade is. In the charter, and I can say, let me see the vision of the charter that the Fair Trade Federation shares. It's a vision of a world in which justice, equity, and sustainable development are at the heart of trade structures and practices, so that everyone through their work can maintain a decent and dignified livelihood. Right? I mean, it's just it seems like the right thing to do
Yeah.
as businesses and organizations and entrepreneurs.
Like basically like the mission statement. It's the heart. It's the platform.
Exactly. So our principles, we have 9, and they really form our value system of how our members have committed to behaving. And within those, or in addition to those 9 principles, we have developed a code of practice, and that goes into the very specific details in how our members should behave with respect to each individual principle. The fair trade principles are to create opportunities, develop transparent and accountable relationships, build capacity, promote fair trade, pay promptly and fairly, support safe and empowering working conditions, ensure the rights of children, cultivate environmental stewardship, and to respect cultural identity.
Oh, that's an important one.
Yeah.
That can get lost.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I'd say our members have committed to what they would say is a pretty high bar. They use the term fully committed, or, they really are fair trade enterprises that fair trade is at the DNA of what they do, not just in their relationships with those that make or supply their products or whatever it is they're selling, but what they do and how they operate domestically as well.
Yeah.
So it is considered, a challenging organization to be part of in some ways because it is such a high bar, but that's also the value that we have because, when someone buys a product from a Fair Trade Federation member, they can have a high level of assurance that did not come at the cost of someone's health or dignity.
Yes.
And really, that's really the core for me. Like if I was to put my consumer hat on, here's a good example. Walk through the personal care section of Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm.
Good, great store. We could debate that the pros and cons, but in the marketplace, they do strive to offer products that are of value. But just think about all the different messages that you get. It's confusing, right? To know like what's the full impact. So our members pride themselves on the value in which is derived from the full commitment to having fair trade at the DNA of everything that they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something that, just like you said, as a consumer is important for you. And that's something that's important for me. And I got to a point, and I don't remember, I wish it was like a light bulb moment to when it really, really clicked for me in so many ways. I mean, it was a process over time from when I've told this story on the podcast before about when I first visited the Kazuri factory in Nairobi, Kenya.
Great story.
Yes, and so I loved visiting that factory and seeing firsthand the impact that opportunity provided for these amazing women who had been dealt just an impossible hand in life. And when it began to click for me, I realized, I was like, you know what? Like there is no piece of jewelry, there is no pair of shoes, there is no t-shirt to me personally that is worth someone else's life being treated as not worthy.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Just so I can
totally
buy that
agree.
item. And so it's paramount for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, another way that our members are diverse is the people that they work with. It's sometimes challenging to use language that, and I always aspire to use language to remove other thinking, quote unquote, other thinking, because, there's lots of different ways in which, organizations and companies can express their values through their trading practices. But, when you get down to it, I don't know, it's just a a profound thing to think about the impact that your purchase has, and the origin of a piece of clothing or jewelry. The ways that our members are also diverse, as I said, is their populations that they work with. So, sorry, I'm stumbling on my speech here because I've got all of these stories like flooding to front of my brain.
Absolutely.
So some of our members work with populations that are very marginalized in different ways. Some of our members work exclusively with women who are former sex workers that have been trafficked. The actual Fair Trade Federation shirt that we have with our logo that our team wears and we have our members wearing sometimes is from Freeset.
Yes,
and
Freeset.
They work. Yeah, they're amazing, and they literally bought the building on the corner of the red light district in Calcutta so that they could be a resource and also an escape in some ways for women caught in the sex trade. It's just extraordinary to think about an organization that chooses bravery and courage like that to do good. I mean, it's just, I get choked up sometimes hearing the stories of some of our members. I was able to travel to India and Nepal on a trip with 10,000 Villages in 2008 and visited so many amazing groups. Just I could go on and on. One in particular, which was a World Fair Trade Organization member and member of Fair Trade Group Nepal called New Sadle. And they work in the Kathmandu Valley, they work with exclusively with a population that has been afflicted by leprosy, which is really just a viral, infection, and can be treated pretty cheaply actually. But once you have it, those people are just outcast from society. It's seen culturally as they're cursed, and it's really, really rough. And so, those types of that type of impact is just hard to put into words sometimes.
Yeah.
But again, that when you purchase something, that you are doing the opposite of harming someone, which if you just walk through Walmart or a store and just consider a T-shirt for $1.99. This was an example that was given to us in a presentation by our keynote speaker at our conference last year, Nazreen Sheikh. I recommend you go on to the web. She has done a TED Talk, and she was just interviewed recently. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he just interviewed Russell Brand.
I know who you're talking about.
Jay Shetty.
Yes.
Sorry, Jay Shetty. So anyway, she just gave us this amazing stark example of the mindfulness of supply chains and the mindfulness that we really need to have as a society, when we are purchasing things. So she went into Walmart. She was, as I said, she was a speaker at a conference. She went into Walmart before she arrived at the conference and walked in and saw a T-shirt for $1.99, and she looked at the tag. She said she started getting sick in her stomach. She looked in the tag and it found and could trace that it was from the same company that she actually was basically a indentured worker when she was in Nepal as a child, and then proceeded to tell everyone her story about a letter that she wrote to the company, kind of more of a rhetorical letter. I don't know if it was ever delivered, but she's delivered the letter to different audiences, and it's very, very powerful example of the mindfulness that must be, in my mind, be in the minds of any consumer globally, that we really are, there are some really great things about globalism, and there's really terrible things about globalism. I mean, if there wasn't colonialism, or history of just this extreme global inequality that exists because of that, then globalism would probably be, everything would be pretty equal, right? If we were all in the equal playing field. But fortunately, that's not our global history, and that, our members really fully understand that. And I think that they've made a very brave and not easy, or sometimes affordable way to be a business or social enterprise.
Yeah.
But they know that there isn't another choice.
Right.
So
right. Now, this is a question I have, and I know you mentioned this. You said that the Fair Trade Federation is part of the larger World Fair Trade Organization. For the longest time, I didn't fully understand the difference.
Yeah.
So can you just kind of quickly explain like what the difference is between the two? I know obviously Fair Trade Federation works in the United States and Canada, but like how is it differentiated on the whole?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting and unfortunately complex question, but I'll try to frame it as simply as I can. So, so the Fair Trade Federation works with organizations based in the U.S. and Canada, working globally. The World Fair Trade Organization, it really works globally. They do have some members in the U.S. and Canada, but just a few, and we actually they're both members of World Fair Trade Organization and the Fair Trade Federation.
Oh, okay.
So. Yeah, really, what the Fair Trade Federation doesn't do is we do not verify producer groups. We verify fair trade enterprises based in the U.S. and Canada.
Okay.
And the WFTO, they are instrumental in verifying the practices of producer groups all over the world.
Okay.
Remember, going back to the Fair Trade Charter, the Fair Trade Charter, the kind of core values that we all share. Says that you're allowed to utilize the core values of the Fair Trade Charter in two different ways.
Yeah.
One is through certification of products through the Fair Trade International system. If you've seen the kind of green and blue yin-yang kind of symbol, that's Fair Trade International. They have Fair Trade Canada and Fair Trade America. And so that they're definitely directly connected. The other charter also says, in addition to the Fair Trade International system, that you can manifest the charter's values through member organizations that have fair trade at the core of their mission of what they do. And that's how the WFTO and FTF are similar.
Okay.
So here's I think a good example, and I try to explain the difference between certification and what we do. So certification is a great tool to certify a supply chain of one commodity from source to consumer. It's something that is on one product, right? Like coffee or chocolate, or bananas, or quinoa.
Right.
And so it's processed in a central location. It's certain, and so the supply chain monitoring can happen in kind of a linear fashion. I know that it's more complex than that, but that's kind of the main way that happens. And then the license is paid so that you can have the logo and on that individual product. But a company can have a certified product and they can have a non-certified product. They can sell whatever they want, and they can have a Starbucks is an example. They sell a very small amount of certified fair trade coffee. The vast majority is not certified, but of course they let you know that they sell fair trade certified coffee.
Yeah.
So we think that's a good thing, right? Because whenever there can be accountability across the supply chain, that's always good. And the higher the standard, the better, because there's multiple certifiers and there's different approaches.
Yeah.
So Fair Trade Federation and WFTO, we verify the entire organization, not just one product.
Okay.
So that when an entire organization is verified, that everything that they sell must meet our principles and specifically our code of practice. And just for your listeners that are interested, I'll put in a little plug. You can go to fairtradefederation.org. Our mission, our values, our principles are there. Plus, you can download a copy of our code of practice if you're really, really into all of the details. Nothing more that we love somebody that's so interested in us that they would read our code of practice. So that's all available to anyone on our website. So.
Yeah. Now, this is another question that I get all the time, and it's a nuanced one. And I know that you are a little biased because you work for the Fair Trade Federation, but that's okay. I get the question all the time, can something be ethical and not be fair trade?
The answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and it is a challenging thing to think about. But we have, you can go on, like I said, you can go on our website and see pretty quickly, we have pretty high bar, and we have eligibility requirements too. So, for example, currently, we have 100 retail stores. Yeah. Just think of that. 100 retail stores that have said to us and to themselves and to their communities and to their customers, this is so important that we are going to have this other organization verify and tell us basically what we can purchase. 85% of all of the products sourced in a Fair Trade Federation member store must meet the principles, must meet the standard. Otherwise, it cannot be sold. We do have 15% that they can be educational products and things that are environmentally friendly, but it's not like they can just go and buy something and sell it from China or whatever, something cheaper that was, and not environmentally friendly. Right. So it's a very high bar, and we have 100 of them. It's just, it's extraordinary to me. Yeah. So basically, it is a high bar, but we think it is the right one, right? Mm-hmm. We know that our members, and yes, I am biased. We're passionate about this. Yeah. But absolutely, if you think about it this way, I don't know if I'd officially say this, but I'd say the fair trade movement right now is really a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And it is somewhat, there's always a little bit of discomfort, right? Because we've been using the term fair trade for so long, but, we're really okay with that because we have our values and our principles backing up what we do. What is sometimes, I'd say, challenging if somebody just overtly says we're fair trade, and maybe they'll meet only one or two of the principles. That's better than nothing, certainly. But I think it's also a challenge and an opportunity for us to educate our consumers about why it is important that if you're going to, as a fair trade enterprise, use those terms and use that language, that having transparency and some type of third party or official connection to this movement is so essential. Because if you make a supply chain transparent, watch it change, right? Yes. It's going to change by one way or another. It is going to have to change. Look at all of the large multinational companies that have had to change when their supply chain was made transparent, usually not by their choosing. Nike's example in the late 90s of the Kathy Lee Gifford sweatshop debacle. I did my master's thesis on that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And the Rana Plaza tragedy, which is so incredibly gut-wrenching and heart-wrenching. Jury's still out, but at least there's transparency, on that. So we feel that transparency built into our organization's values and the way in which our members have basically agreed to behave is really important. It is also very easy just to say, hey, we're fair trade, we're ethical too. And, that's just the challenge in the marketplace. But, going back to what I originally said, yes, absolutely, you can be ethical and not fair trade because our eligibility requirements are very specific. Yeah. There are lots of great organizations and people doing great work that just aren't eligible. I mean, it's astounding. There's so much great work. So we think that's a good thing, too.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's our challenge, and we have to own it somewhat, to do as best a job as we can to explain to customers, both loyal and new and potential, about who we are and what we believe in and what we have to offer. Because we feel very strongly that when people understand that, they are a lifelong convert. How many times I have been on the floor of a fair trade store, somebody walks in and they're like, oh, this is a beautiful, scarf or necklace. And then I'll tell them the story of the person that made it, because we kind of know their name sometimes. And we know what conditions they made it and how it has impacted their community. And they're like, oh, I've driven past this store forever and I didn't even know. And now I'm going to shop here for my aunt and for my mom. And then they're never shop anywhere else, So that is a very common occurrence. It's a conversion that happens, similar to the story that you tell about the Kazuri workshop. It's like a light switch.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen with everyone. We're in a challenging time in our lives, in our society right now, where they're talking about, seriously talking about walls, and we're talking about immigrants in a way that is just so antithetical to what I believe in and what our community believes in by extension of our values. And, we're not going to get everyone, but those that are open are I've seen the conversion happen, and it's just such an incredible joy to do that, rather than sell whatever at high margin and an extractive supply chain, an extractive capitalism, and then for the delight of the shareholders. I mean, that's just not something I could ever be part of.
Yes. Amen to all of that. I could not agree more. And it's just something that I have, it's a learning process, and it's something I tell people all the time. Like, when people get into learning about fair trade and ethical fashion and purchasing with purpose and all of that, and I just say, guys, it's not an overnight, just complete restructure of how you purchase things. It's a process, and it's beginning to educate yourself, but then you realize the importance of it, and it becomes a ripple effect of, you start by just the way you purchase gifts during the holidays. And then maybe you change how you buy your kids' clothes, and then you change how you buy clothes for yourself, and you change, maybe you start recycling more. You enter into the zero waste community and all of those things. Like, it is a process. It takes time. But the more that you commit to it and the more that you educate yourself, the more of an impact that you have. And you really do have an impact. You really do make a difference. And the artisans, these small businesses, they feel it. They feel those purchases. They feel that impact. And it changes lives. It sounds so maybe cliche or, over the top, but it really does change lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in this case, I would actually say it's not cliche. That's usually a cliche, but in the context of this conversation, it is quite appropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, it is somewhat, I'd say, it is somewhat frustrating sometimes now because climate change, everything that we do, that things that we can control and things that we can't control, sometimes it can seem so overwhelming. All we can do is make good choices and educate ourselves to the impact of those choices. So many of our what we call our food and farm members in particular, dealing with I was having a conversation with Bené Berta, who's this amazing woman who founded Maggie's Organics, and the effect that climate change has had on her supply chain, from having to abandon whole areas in countries where you can't grow cotton anymore. It's gone. It's gone forever. And our coffee cooperative members, and I was talking with somebody from Equal Exchange, and from co-op coffees, how they're very directly. This is not like they get a harsher than usual storm from now and then. It's actually their climate is changing so much that their agricultural patterns have to change because they don't have the choice. So that part is really overwhelming. But I raise it as an example to reinforce what you were saying, which is making choices beyond just what you purchase is also important too, because we are such a consumer-focused society. What we do is it's an alternative trade model, right?
Yeah.
It seeks to level the playing field from global inequality and make sure that our choices don't come at the cost of someone else's dignity and their environment, right? Like I said before, and it's much more than that too, because if you really want to do as much good in the world as possible. But we view trade as a vehicle for positive change. Those trading relationships that distribute power, risks, and rewards equitably, good thing, right? We feel really strongly that trade should be used as a tool to reduce inequality and create opportunities. It's not going to solve everything. I'm mentioning this now too because just again, if any of your listeners like me are just feeling overwhelmed by our world right now, trying to make as big an impact as I possibly can, and so beyond your purchasing decisions, have just as much of an impact as what you buy.
Yes. Amen. Well, in a couple weeks, there is something really exciting happening in Austin, Texas, and that is the 25th annual Fair Trade Federation, or I guess this is the 25th anniversary of the Fair Trade Federation, and it's the annual conference. And so that's going to be in Austin, Texas in March. It's the 26th, 27th, 28th. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's March 26th to the 28th.
Yes.
In Austin, Texas. We're very, very excited. It's the 20. So the Fair Trade Federation was founded in 1994. And we were looking at the last year at our board retreat, we were looking at planning the conference, and I was like, oh, that's 25 years. We should maybe celebrate a little bit, right? I mean, it's astounding to think that this organization, when it was started by 16 organizations, 12 of which are still members and successful and trading, just it's astounding. And so I'm sure that we will acknowledge those amazing people and those organizations. But to think about 16 now to we're just under 250 members, it's just something that we wanted to celebrate. So our annual conference moves each year. Last year it was in Westminster, Colorado, just halfway between Denver and Boulder. Was so incredibly successful, hard to describe. It's a professional conference. Certainly we have breakout sessions on very specific topics like digital strategy, supply chain, like value supply chain challenges, and best practices. We're trying to have a session coming up on gender violence and inequality. So just incredible sessions. We have things for retailers. It's just really, really cool. We also have amazing speakers. As I mentioned, Nazreen. We also had B'nai Burda tell the origin story for Maggie's Organics. And it has, like I said, a feel of a professional conference, but also I get tongue-tied a little bit because it's hard to describe the like-mindedness of everyone that is there at these conferences because they are attracted to fair trade and to this community. I should really just highlight that, the Fair Trade Federation, yes, they're trading, we sell products, and we have I think we have 65 members exhibiting at New York Now, coming up, the big gift show. You would look at them and these are amazingly sophisticated business people with incredible design, the most beautiful textiles and products. It's mind-blowing. But, we're a community. People that meet in these conferences become lifelong friends. Just the shared values and vision and the way in which you behave and as a person, the way in which you behave as a group, a community, an organization, social enterprise, whatever it is, we're already like-minded. And it's just extraordinary. The energy and the conversations that happen. There's a lot of great information on fair trade, especially if you're interested in starting a fair trade enterprise, whether you're interested in fair trade fashion or if you're interested in agriculture and coffee. If you're interested in development projects, like there's this amazing organization called Grow Ahead. I really recommend that your listeners look them up. Like it's kind of like a microfinance group for small organic farmers.
Yeah.
Just so extraordinary, and we're hoping to have them there as well. So there's a lot of great education information if you're interested in starting some type of fair trade endeavor. If you're interested in retail, we have a retailer seminar. Also, there's what we have is the expo, and that's the only thing of its kind that I know of in the world, really. I'm sure there's something similar the WFTO does, but on this scale, I'd say I'm pretty confident this is the only place where you'll find up to 50, fair trade verified exhibitors in one room.
Yeah, I am so excited.
So
I'm going to
cool.
be there in March. So
Yes,
if you guys are
yes.
in the Austin area or you want to travel to Austin because Austin's just an amazing city, we can get tacos. It'll be great. And you can check out the expo because this part is open to the public. And so you can do some shopping.
On the 27th.
Yes, on the 27th.
Yeah.
So do you need to get tickets for the actual expo? Like if you're just a consumer, you want to come and shop, do you need to get tickets or can you just walk in, or how does that work?
If you go to our website, fairtradefederation.org, and click on the conference, there will be information about the expo open to the public, which is Wednesday, March 27th from 2:30 to 5:30. This is somewhat new for us. We've had our expo kind of open, but we're really making a big splash. So please join us for that. But yeah, you can find all those details on our website.
Awesome. Well, I am so excited. I'm so pumped to meet all of the people that are going to be there. It's going to be so much fun. And plus, again, Austin, tacos, all the things. It's going to be great. It is going to be great. Well, Chris, this has been so much fun. Just learning more about you and learning more about the Fair Trade Federation and answering my my questions that I get all the time, so that can help me better answer them when I get them. So thank you for that. This is also the part of the show where we transition a little bit and get to know you, and we ask just some fun get to know you questions. And as my listeners know, this is also where my husband inserts a sound effect or movie clip or quote of his choosing. So you never know what it's going to be. So Chris, are you ready for that?
I think so.
Not everybody's a winner, okay? Sorry. I'm from Cleveland. I should know firsthand. But I'm going to tell you something. Northeast Ohio has the lowest divorce rate in the entire country. You know that? Yeah. And it's because of the Browns. Because you keep thinking, maybe next year it'll get better. And it never gets better. Nope. Just gets too cold to move. I would leave you, but there's snow on the ground. Wait till April.
All right. The first question is, what was your favorite TV show to watch growing up?
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Boy, I'd have to say Star Trek, the original.
Yeah.
I'm a sci-fi.
Are you talking about like LeVar
geek.
Burton with the headband over his eyes?
Well, that probably dates me a little bit. Watching the original in syndication, but certainly Next Generation, yes, absolutely. But I was in my teenage years to date myself a little bit. So I have a long list. I was a TV junkie kid of the 80s. The 4 channels that we got.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Where like at 10 p.m., the TV turned to the rainbow bars. And it was
exactly.
off until morning. Yes. Oh, yes. And you had to actually like get up off the couch to go change the channel. Yes. It was.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was a whole thing. Okay. The second question is, if you had to eat the same meal for dinner every night for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Wow. That is extraordinary. As I love to cook and I love all sorts of food.
Oh.
Oh. If I had, I'd have to consider my health too, but I'd probably say what my wife and I refer to as cowboy breakfast.
Oh,
which
is that with like the ground beef and hash
Nope.
browns? Oh no.
No. Well, for us, it might be that, but in our household, it's black beans, organic eggs, cooked however, guacamole, and rice
Oh.
with salsa and a little sour cream.
I'm here for that. I'm gonna need
And
to.
hot sauce. So that if I had to pick one, that's really rough because I mean, being stuck with one meal that would be challenging.
It would be challenging, but that does sound delicious. Not gonna lie, I might make that for breakfast for myself tomorrow. Okay, what is your guilty pleasure?
Oh boy, I have a list. Unfortunately, I'd have to say beer. I brew my own beer.
Oh,
I have for
nice.
25 years, and when I lived in Cleveland, I actually grew my own hops in a little city garden. That's probably if you. I'm trying to think. If you asked one of my friends what would they say, I'd probably say that. So to be fully transparent.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That I am not patient enough to do something like that. So that's awesome. I have a friend who is really into brewing her own beer, and I just am, I'm like, well, I'll taste it, but yeah. I don't know that I could actually sit and do it, but that's awesome. That sounds like so much fun. Okay, and then my last question is, what are you most grateful for today?
Oh boy, that's quite a question. Again, I have a long list of things that I'm grateful for. I guess what I'm most grateful for, and I try to be mindful of, is the privilege and opportunity that I've been afforded. I'm white male in the United States, and I would be foolish and lying to myself and others if I would say that I didn't have a tremendous advantage in so many things that I can't change how I was born and who I am, but mindfulness of where I am and what I have and how I was afforded the opportunity to be here where I am. I think that's really been, certainly at this point in my life, very important. And I think it's also, by extension to our society, something, I probably mentioned in this last 30 minutes or so, is really needed. And I just hope that, that I am able to be mindful and grateful as best I can, because no one's perfect, certainly. And as I said, I hope that, others are able to be honest with themselves about the privilege that they have.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm grateful for.
Yeah. Well, Chris, that is amazing. And thank you again for sharing your story and sharing the story of the Fair Trade Federation. This has been so much fun, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. I'm so happy to be here. I hope I represented our organization well. You did.
I tend, as our members know, to get very passionate and somewhat tongue-tied when I get going. But thank you so much for having me on this show. And I wanted to thank you too, because when I first heard your show, I was like, who is this woman, Molly? And why is she doing this amazing thing? Like, did somebody ask her to do? No one asked her to do this. So thank you for all you're doing in trying to push the envelope and get other organizations to behave like we know Fair Trade Federation members feel is right. So thank you for that.
Well, it is my pleasure. It's an honor, and it's just something I'm really passionate about. So I appreciate you saying that.
Excellent.
I would love to know what you loved about this episode, or something new that you learned, maybe a fact about fair trade you didn't know before. Whatever it is, let me know on social media. You can find me at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. And don't forget to use that hashtag Business with Purpose Podcast. Make sure to tag me, share with your friends, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you are a first-time listener of the show, welcome. Be sure to visit the archives for past shows featuring incredible entrepreneurs and business owners who are literally changing the world with their businesses. And if you're a regular listener of the show, thank you so much for tuning in and week out, and thank you for your support. Be sure to head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Radio Public, Overcast, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you're subscribed to the show. Clicking that subscribe button helps to make sure that you never miss a new episode of the podcast. And while you're there, would you mind taking a moment to leave a review of the show? Leaving a review helps me to know what you're liking and how the show is personally impacting you. As always, this show is edited by my amazing husband and executive producer, John Stillman, and the music is by Mark Killian of Third Wheel Media. Thank you so much for listening, and go do something good with purpose on purpose.